Good evening, everyone, and good evening at home. I'm going to open a word of prayer, then I got a little funny story to tell. Lord, thank you so much for this beautiful day. We are expecting a little bit of rain tomorrow. We thank you for that. We always can use rain. And Lord, we pray now that you'll rain upon us with your word and that it will be that which we need, Lord, in our own daily walk with you as we continue in the book of Proverbs. And we pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. So I told Leo, now we've got it on the screen. It says we'll start in a moment, because for those of you at home, we always start like 4 minutes after 6:30 to allow people to come in. And so anyway, I said, hey, Leo, we need to do something. Because the people are probably coming on there and seeing that it isn't on, they're just leaving. So we need a sign. We need to do it like when I was a kid growing up in Richmond, Virginia, back in the early 50s. You know, I was just a little kid in the early 50s, and the TV, home TV, was really just getting popular. And so we had a TV, and it was always flickering, you know, wasn't keeping steady. You always had to adjust it. And so on Saturday morning, I'd get up to watch the Howdy Doody show. And so what would appear on the screen was a piece of cardboard, and it was a side view of an Indian. And then when it came on, you would see this hand reach out and grab the cardboard and pull it off to the side, and then you'd see everything happening. I said, we got to do that, Leo, and we got to get your hand in there. So you pull it off from the side. It's just like we're going to go retro here. But unfortunately, even though we have so many improvements and new things, we can't bring back that old retro one unless we can figure it out somehow. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Just pull it off. Anyway, we're in Proverbs 20 tonight, and let me just make a couple comments. And that is, as I was reviewing for tonight, as I was investigating this, and that's what I always do. I go through it multiple times and and I'm asking the Lord, show me something here. Is there something you want me to see? And so what I found was that there were 4 verses that were addressed to, Solomon was addressing the king. And then there was 6 verses in which he was speaking about the Lord. And so when we start off, and we're going to look at the first verse in a minute, and it's going to speak about the king having absolute authority. But then when you go over to the ones on the Lord, then Solomon reminds him that no, it's the Lord who has absolute authority. Your authority is under his authority. And there was 4 basic things that were commenting about kings, but then they were superseded by things said about the Lord. In other words, Solomon was continually reminding Solomon that he had to get everything he got from the Lord. There was an authority structure, and he needed to take very seriously his authority as king, okay? But at the same time, he had to allow God to really let him know that. So we're going to deal with some issues tonight where, like I said, there's basically 30 verses in this chapter. And 4 of them are dealing with kings, him as a king of an eventual king, speaking to the son, and then 6 that are dealing with the Lord, and then the remainder will be about his position as king and things he needed to keep in mind. So let's pick it up right where in verse 1. Wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. The wrath of a king is like the roaring of a lion. Whoever provokes him to anger sins against his own life. It is honorable for a man to stop striving, since any fool can start a quarrel. And so last week in chapter 19, we took a look at what Solomon was trying to tell him in terms of being a balanced king. You got to think of it from a king's perspective. He's going to be a judge, too. He's going to judge things. So he's going to have all sorts of disappointments come his way. He's going to get challenges. The establishment and keeping of his kingdom is going to be dependent upon how he responds to keep the people encouraged, to have peace in the kingdom, to have their respect. He's going to have to be, in some cases, not only authoritarian, but he's going to have to really bring down the guillotine, if you would. And then at other times, as we saw last time, he has to have, as undergirding his whole kingship, has to be mercy and a loving kindness. And we're going to see that in just a minute. But right here it starts, wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. So what he's saying there is you have to have self-control. Okay? That's what he's saying. Self-control is the issue there. He's going to be king. He's going to have the ability to have feasts 365 days out of the year. And I think if you've read anything in Roman history, you know what those feasts, a lot of them were like. So how he runs his kingdom is going to have a big effect on the longevity of that kingdom, how long it lasts. So he's warning right off the front here. Wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. What's the whole point of the book of Proverbs? Wisdom, the gaining of wisdom. So he's saying here, son, you need to have self-control. He takes it a step further. The wrath of a king is like the roaring of a lion. Whoever provokes him to anger sins against his own life. In other words, son, you've got absolute authority. You have absolute authority. You have it's not so much the people having a fear of God, it's a fear of you. And in terms of how you run that kingship, how what your attitude is toward others. And again, there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure because of the issues that he will face that nobody knows. It's just like a president of the United States. When he enters into office, he might have all the great ideas in the world, but all of a sudden something shifts. The economy shifts, world relations shift, war in other places. All of a sudden things start to happen. And then if you choose the wrong people, that was 3 chapters ago, if you don't choose wise advisors, then you're going to find they're going to get you in trouble too. And some of them might even be actually doing things to get you. So as king, what he's going to really have to make sure is that his heart is not corrupted, so that he comes across as a tyrant, as it's off with the head. And we have enough illustrations historically of that to know that that's the type of king a person can ends up being. So he then tempers that, okay, just like he did last week. After he says that verse, he says, it is honorable for a man to stop striving. That means to avoid strife, since any fool can start a quarrel. So if he allows the experience that he has to corrupt his heart, to make him into, to have him a person of wrath, and believe me, once you start going that direction, it's hard to come out of that direction. If he starts judging in a manner that is off with the head, it's going to be a lot easier for the others to come down off with the head. And all of a sudden, what will that do in the community, the people, the kingdom? They're going to have disrespect for him, okay? And it can actually cause to uprisings and people favoring other people that are jockeying for position, So again, King Solomon, what's going to be really neat as we get into this, you're going to see King Solomon go back to his own beginnings in terms of his pursuit of wisdom, okay? So again, the first verse has to do with self-control. Second verse, here's the 2 options. The second verse shows the option of wrath. The third option, nope, you can be a king that is going to you're going to avoid strife, and you're going to handle it in a way he's going to show later, just like he did last week, of based in truth and loving kindness and mercy. And that's where he's going to end up taking him. And so I wrote down here, as king, you must exhibit self-control. You have absolute authority. Use it with honor and avoid strife, which is the domain of fools. Okay, and we'll see that again in a minute. Verses 4 through 7. The lazy man will not plow because of winter. He will beg then during harvest and have nothing. Okay. So he's now dealing with what we talked about the last couple weeks, a term that I came up with, and that was what? Inherited advantage. That because he's born to the king, he has an inherited advantage, and how he determines to use that. And there is a negative side in that he's going to live in a castle. He's going to have all these people helping him in everything he does. And there's always the temptation that inherited advantage will lead to him being lazy as a king. That he'll just live off of the luxury of what he's got, okay? And that's always a threat in terms of inherited advantage, whether you're born the child of a king or if you're born to in a family of billionaires or millionaires, there's always that threat that the person will not have the strength of character to understand that each new generation must make its way and must be profitable, okay? The lazy man will not plow because of winter. He will beg during harvest and have nothing. Counsel in the heart of man is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. So there's the two options. One, you can be lazy, or one, you can be the person that draws things out. You have to focus on what? Wisdom. This is all about wisdom. And the 7 pillars, counsel's pillar, 3. So you have the different things that you need to work at to achieve, okay? And there's no really limits to what I was watching a documentary because of my background in long distance running. I was watching an interview between Jerry Lindgren and his former coach. Jerry Lindgren, when he started out, he's very small. He has a squeaky voice like this, and that's how he even talks today. And he talked about how his father said, "You're never," he berated him and everything. You're a terrible person. You're never going to make it. You've got nothing going. It's just mean-spirited. I believe he was an alcoholic, his dad, he said. And so he went out for sports, and he was he always was falling all over himself. He was not in any way gifted in that area that he thought. And so finally, through a circumstance that happened, he got involved with going out for the running team at his school, and he always finished last. Everything they did, it was last in every workout. And so he wasn't even on the team yet because he was last. And then one day he was so upset, and some event happened that made him even more upset. I can't remember now. But he decided, I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to run as fast as I can for as long as I can, and whatever happens, happens. So the coach was having him run quarter miles, one lap of a track, and he went as fast as he could. He made it, like a third of the way around and was winning. Then, and this is just a workout, everybody on the team passed him. And then he got up to a halfway around, and then he died, and everybody passed him. And so he got to the point where he's going to quit because it wasn't working. And so he went up to the coach, and the coach said, "Before you have something to say, I want to say how valuable you are to this team." He says, "What do you mean? I get wiped out every time I run." He says, No, you don't understand. Because you go out so fast, the guys have to catch you because none of them want to be beat by you. And instead of running our quarters in 70 seconds, you have them running it in 60 seconds. So you are of great service to the rest of this team to help this team to become a good team. And he said that was with him. The rest of I'm of service. I'm serving others. I'm helping others. And so that's how he approached it. Ended up, he became one of the most talented distance runners in the United States, went to the Olympic Games, set all sorts of records. Right here, I went to the race, 1964, I think it was, in Balboa Stadium, where he and Billy Mills, no, it was 62, because in 64, Billy Mills would win the Olympics in the 10,000 meters. And they ran together. Well, there was other people in the race, but it came down to the end, and they basically both had the exact same time and broke the American record. And that's who he was. He was just a little skinny guy with a squeaky voice, but he worked and he worked and he worked. In other words, he wasn't one possessed with natural talent. He was one that just outworked, okay? And it's just an amazing story. If you go on YouTube, just look up Jerry Lindgren, interview with his coach. It's really inspiring. So he offers the two, the lazy man, and then he says what he's really wanting from his son is that he'll pursue wisdom and he'll be able to dig it out. He'll be able to grab it and pull it out and he'll spend time with it. He'll be focused on it like Jerry Lindgren was on what he was doing. Most men will proclaim each his own goodness, but who can find a faithful man? There's a difference between lip service and actual activity. So here he's saying, look, some people just talk about themselves incessantly, but who can actually find a person that's faithful? In other words, a person that will endure, a person that will be consistent, that will develop a reputation. In other words, that's who he's saying. He says, son, here's the kind of king I want you to be. I don't want you to be lazy. I don't want you to be full of rage. What I want you to be is a person that is kind, considerate, but also can be tough. We'll see that in a couple of minutes. And at the same time, we want you not to be lazy, but we want you to be a person that can be focused on the fact that you have an inherited advantage. You have been chosen to be king, and now you're coming to your time to be able to actually express that. Finally, verse 7, the righteous man walks in his integrity. His children are blessed after him. Okay. Now, you can look at that two ways, blessed after him. You can say blessed after him, meaning in the family, or you can see it as Solomon saw it, and that is after his father's death. And we'll show that in just a minute. So I just wrote this down. Don't be a lazy king. Your inherited advantage must serve you, not you serve it. You have to work at being a wise king. That begins with becoming a man of understanding who can practice it. Be faithful to God, your people, and your kingdom. Think about them more than yourself. Live a righteous life, and your children will be blessed even after your death. So as I was thinking about that, my mind came to realize, or to go back to Solomon's first prayer. Because he's saying, when he says there, or as I interpreting it here, will be blessed even after your death, live a righteous life, and your children. I'm thinking of King Solomon's dad, David, his life, then Solomon, what he said in his original prayer. Listen to this. This is from 1 Kings chapter 3. If you remember, Solomon, God reveals or comes to him in a dream and asks him, what it is that you want. And then he wakes up, and now he's going to speak to God. And he says this, and Solomon said, you have shown great mercy to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in truth, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart with you. There it is, okay, the father. You have continued this great kindness for him, and you have given him a son to sit on his throne, speaking of himself, as it is this day. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king instead of my father David, but I am a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to be numbered or counted. Therefore, give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours? So right there you see him instructing his son from his personal experience. Now, I went on a walk of 1.5 miles this morning with one of our grandkids. And when we were walking, we were coming up to a certain spot, and I said, okay, here's where you have to be very careful because it's hot out here, and that means the snakes may be coming out, including the rattlesnakes, which are typical where we live out in the country. And I said, you see this sandy area here? You need to be really careful. If I'm not with you, if you're walking out here with your sisters or whatever, be careful, especially right here in this sandy area, because they tend to come up right here. So what was I doing? I was sharing out of my life's experience, my experience on living out there, and just passing it on. That's what Solomon's doing. You can see it. The very prayer that God touched his life with is now he's saying, I need you to be the one that, like deep waters, you pull understanding out so you can wisely judge, that you can wisely lead this nation. Okay. All right, so verses 8 through 11. A king who sits on the throne of judgment scatters all evil with his eyes. That means he has discernment. Okay, think of his father. Think of Solomon with the two women that came. And he says, get me a sword. I'm going to cut the baby in half and give each of you half. He used discernment there on how to approach that issue of two women, one a liar and one telling the truth. Okay, he wants his son to be able to have a relationship with God that he can dig that out also. Okay, who can say, I have made my heart clean, I am pure from my sin? Now, the obvious reaction we have to that is no one. Okay, but that's really not the reaction that we're wanting here. The reaction is a person that is seeking God with their heart and wanting to be in his position like his Father of discerning and being able to minister correctly to the people. So it's not a matter of being perfect. It's a matter of heart attitude, and whether you're a lazy person or you're a person that's really in pursuit of God. Never forget, without faith it is impossible to please God. He that comes to God must believe that he is, and that he's a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. So that's what we're looking for here. Diverse weights and diverse measures, they are both alike an abomination to the Lord. We saw that last week. And that is the fact that you can't have a double standard. Son, you cannot be judge of Israel, and you're playing one thing for your cronies and your buddies and maybe even your blood relatives, and then you're teaching other people or judging the normal people of the kingdom in a different manner. You can't have a double standard. And we see so much of that. We see so much of that going on in terms of double standards. Even a child is known by his deeds, whether what he does is pure and right. Even a child is, what did he say? I am but a child. Okay. Even a child is known by his deeds, whether that what he does is pure and right. In other words, Solomon understood that character and conduct are intricately connected with what a person believes eventually works itself out through their words and actions. This begins in childhood and continues throughout life. So he's trying to give him wisdom from his own life experiences. Verses 12 through 15, the hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made them both. The next two verses are going to deal with the seeing eye and the hearing ear. Okay, let me read it again. The hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made them both. Question, for what purpose? Do not love sleep, lest you come to poverty. Open your eyes, and you will be satisfied with bread. See what he's doing there? He's saying, look, in your relationship with the Lord, it is the Lord who made the eyes and ears, and he's given them to you for a purpose, and you're going to need this purpose as king. And the first one is dealing with the eyes. Open your eyes. Don't give in to laziness, okay? Do not love sleep, lest you come to poverty. But he can do that because he's got this inherited advantage, and everything around him, it'd be easy to do that. But no, open your eyes. Look around. Look at what God has given you to do. Don't look so much at yourself. Look at the people. How are you going to serve the people? How are you going to perpetuate the kingdom that God has given to the family? Okay? And, I was making some mention. I had a really neat thing happen Monday, I think it was. But on Sunday, I was talking about how Fabian socialism brought in the progressive movement here in the United States, going back to 1895. And I made mention of the fact that they took their name from Fabius Maximus back in the 3rd century BC. And here's the comment I made. The Fabian family were leaders in the Roman community for 6 centuries. Okay, it was being passed down and passed down and passed down. The neat thing that happened is one of the things I said about the Fabian socialists, when they brought it into America, what they were attacking was the Constitution. They wanted to deal away with the Constitution, but our Constitution was a lot stronger than the British one, so they had success in Britain. They weren't having success here. So the way that they dealt with that is they felt that the way to overcome the Constitution was through judicial activism, having judges who could not go by, say, on the Supreme Court by interpretation of the Constitution, but by judicial activism and untethering from the original intent of the Constitution and just becoming activists, right? Well, Monday I'm watching something on the YouTube, and it comes up this thing that I think it was Maine, and a justice on their lower court, not the Supreme Court, but a lower court, stood up and wrote this opinion against judicial activism. And so that's exactly what we need, because we're seeing some very positive things happening in the United States right now of standing up against some of the excesses and the evil things and the lack of common sense. Remember, that's what this is all about, a return to common sense. And people are starting to stand up and voice things against boys competing in girls' sports or judicial activism, and realizing that, and that's one of the blessings of right now. We have more constitutionalists on the Supreme Court than we've had in not years but decades, really. Okay, and so I mean that's a good reality. Okay, so the hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made them both. Do not love sleep, lest you come to poverty. Open your eyes, and you will be satisfied with bread. You'll be successful. It is good for nothing. Now, this is a quote if you're following with me. This is verse 14. It is good for nothing, cries the buyer, but when he has gone his way, then he boasts. So he's giving him, he's elucidating that verse about the eye and the ear. He's talked about the eye first, and now he's talking about the ear. And he's saying there's going to be people, and they're going to lie, and they're going to know they're lying because they're trying to take advantage of you. And if there's ever a time that we need to hear something like that, it's right now. Okay? Because you are inundated, I am inundated with whether it's on the internet, on my email account, or on your telephone, and you're getting every kind of scam that's coming there of people lying to you. People trying to take advantage. I was watching on YouTube where a poor lady lost $109,000. It was $109,000 in her banking account, and 20 minutes later she had nothing and no way to get it back because she was scammed. She gave the person information. They presented one of these scams, right? So here is the scam that he's dealing in. It is good for nothing, cries the buyer. But when he has gone his way, then he boasts, what a good deal I got. Right? Okay. So scamming and taking advantage of people, there's nothing new under the sun. Okay. It's been around since the beginning. But then he closes with this. There is gold and a multitude of rubies, but the lips of knowledge are a precious jewel. So instead of going after the precious jewels, the rubies and the gold, instead go after the precious jewels of understanding and wisdom. Because if you get the wisdom, the other will follow to the intent of what God wants in your life. And that's the second half of Solomon's prayer to the Lord back in 1 Kings 3. Listen. The speech pleased the Lord when he said, I'm but a child, please give me wisdom so I can rule these people. The speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. Then God said to him, because you have asked this thing and have not asked long life for yourself, nor have asked riches for yourself, nor have asked the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern justice, behold, I have done according to your words. See, I have given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there has not been anyone like you before you, nor shall any like you arise after you. And I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be anyone like you among the kings all your days. So, if you walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days. So he's given the old concept of the cart and the horse. Which comes first, the cart or the horse? Well, the horse is seeking God for wisdom, because out of that wisdom, then you will learn prudence, you'll learn discretion, you'll have understanding, you'll be open to reproof, and you'll walk in your life in a manner that because of that wisdom, then also the honor and the riches will come also. That's God's principle of blessing, okay? Walk faithfully before him, and he'll treat you faithfully also. Can I get an amen? Okay. All right, verses 16 through 18. Now, this is the hardest verse in the whole thing, and this one was driving me up the wall because I try to seek the Lord and find out what these mean, and then if I need to, I'll go and look it up and say, what are they commentators saying on this? Listen to this one. Take the garment of one who is surety for a stranger. Now, that's exactly where I was having trouble, because every verse we've read about surety up to this point saying, no surety. Don't be a surety for anyone. In other words, don't co-sign for anyone. Let them do their own thing, okay? So I'm going, what? Take the garment of one who is surety for a stranger and hold it as a pledge when it is for a seductress. Think about that for a second. Yeah. Think about that for a second. Think for that for a second. Well, here's the deal. Yeah, not Tamar. And the thing that is happening here, but let me tell you, the commentaries, they're all over the board on this one. I mean, you're getting, because they're just commentaries. They're giving their interpretation of what they think has happened. The best thing that I can get out of this is, number one, the not doing usury and also the surety is those commands have to do with the Israelite taking advantage of the poor within the community, those in their own community. This was dealing with strangers, but this is not dealing with strangers in a normal sense, if I can put it that way. In other words, Solomon, I think, is what he's doing here is he's presenting a situation that he has probably run into or something similar, and he's expanding his son's understanding. He wants to give him some wisdom here. And what is basically being said here is you've got a person, a stranger, who is surety for a seductress, which means a prostitute. And now he is not able to fulfill that surety, so he's coming to what eventually be the king and asking for help in the situation. Now, you can raise the question, why would that happen? Well, I think it could happen in this manner. He has a relationship with this prostitute, and in the course of the events of their being with each other, either she came on with a with the big deer eyes and said, "I'm in a terrible spot, and I if you want to see me again." Now remember, it's a seductress, and he's coming. He's become usury for her. I mean, he's the one that's helping her. And so she either that, maybe she just came on strongly and said, "I'm going to let everybody know that you and I are together." I cannot tell. All I can tell is this: some reason he is usury for her, okay? And now something has happened that they're wanting what it was, and he doesn't have it, so he's coming and asking. So, in that sort of a situation, what King Solomon is saying is, listen, you need to get whatever you can get from him, a cloak or whatever, because if it was on the other foot, if it was a surety for someone that's in the community, there's a law that says that if you take a person's cloak, meaning a brother, because for surety, that you have to give it back to him before the sun goes down. And then you can collect it again, but he can't go to sleep, to bed, without his cloak, which is his cover, okay? But in this case, he's saying, you better get something out of this. Why? Because if this guy is so foolish that he's representing this relationship with the seductress, the odds of you getting him back to you are very, very slim. Okay, so he's dealing with another type of issue that obviously could come up. And again, we're looking at Solomon, going back to that original prayer, asking for the type of wisdom. God saying, I'm going to give you wisdom that no one's had before you, nor will have after you. And so he's, if you would, broadening the type of situation that his son is going to eventually get into. Okay? Bread gained by deceit is sweet to a man, but afterward his mouth will be filled with gravel. Deceit, something gained from deceit. Okay? Man, this is so easy to get away with this thing, but all of a sudden, whoop. How many of you have ever eaten a candy bar and it was so sweet until you hit a nut and it almost broke your tooth? That's kind of what is being said here. Something gained by deceit. Might seem easy at first, might seem sweet at first, but it's got a way of, it's, what we sow, we reap, karma, whatever you want to call it. Things tend to come back around after you. So let me read it again. Bread gained by deceit is sweet to a man, but afterward his mouth will be filled with gravel. Now, the concept of filled with gravel, just think about it for a second. In other words, this not only would be distasteful, it's harmful, okay? You're going to get in trouble. Plans are established by counsel. By wise counsel, wage war. So of the things that he is going to face, some things will just involve himself. Some things will involve maybe his family or a couple people. But when it comes to war, that's going to involve your whole kingdom, okay? So you better, if you're considering, son, in the future, because of something that happened to you, an affront, somebody else attacking, then you're going to have to respond, some sort of affront. Okay, I'm remembering back to when Jacob's guys killed all the men because one of them ravaged the daughter and took the whole thing down. And Jacob didn't say, hey, you guys, good for you. We revenged her. No, he said, you caused our name to stink in this land. We have to flee. Okay? So the point being is, if you're considering war, you better get your most trusted, strongest advisors. Before you react emotionally, get some counsel on this thing before you engage. Okay? So again, as we're going through this, you can see all these different areas. A lot of them Solomon has given them out of his own experience to his son. But then others, they are growing out of what Solomon knows is going to be things that are going to confront the boy when he grows up to be king. Verses 19 through 22. He who goes about I named this one, sins of the tongue, okay? And your question is going to be verse 21, because that is also a sin of the tongue. Obviously, in all these is a sin of the heart, okay? But it's going to come off the tongue. He who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets. Therefore, do not associate with one who flatters with his lips. Okay? So whether it's flattering you to get position from you, or whether it's talebearing to put down another person to get into your advantage, he's saying avoid these people. Okay? He goes on to say, whoever curses his father or his mother, his lamp will be put out in deep darkness. God especially does not like that one. And we know why. Honor your father and mother, and what? And your days will be long on the earth. That's a special grievance to God. Why? Because it's a breakdown of authority. As I mentioned at the first, these verses that are being presented here have to do with authority structure. The king has absolute authority on earth, but that's superseded by God's authority. And so what Solomon's trying to get his son to do is push on your relationship with God. Get to know him as I know him, so that you can receive the wisdom to govern correctly. And don't be lazy, and don't be filled with wrath. Why would he be filled with wrath? Maybe he was a good kid, but be king for a while. And then have people betray you. Ides of March. Have people betray you, have people challenge you, have things that you wanted to get done. All of a sudden the environment changes and you can't even go in those areas, and people are complaining and it's not your fault, but the buck stops with you. Is everybody understanding what I'm saying? Okay, so this is the reality of leadership. And the reality of leadership is your heart can grow very cold, very vengeful, making decisions based on pure emotion, in response to things that are done to you. So he's over and over again trying to deal with that issue with his son as he's expanding these areas that he's covering. Whoever curses his father or his mother, his lamp will be put out in deep darkness. So we have a person cursing. Again, it's on the lips. Now, check this next one out, because we're going to come back to it after we do 22. Verse 21, an inheritance gained hastily at the beginning will not be blessed at the end. Now, that doesn't sound like anything that's verbal, but we'll see that it is in a minute. Then finally, 22, do not say, I will recompense evil. Wait for the Lord, and he will save you. So again, don't act emotionally. Wait on the Lord, see how the Lord directs. And David really was a master of that when we discussed that before with Shimei. Didn't do anything during, he felt that God was using Shimei for his own lack of holiness in terms of the situations that he got himself into with Bathsheba and the killing of her husband. And so he allowed Shimei to blaspheme him, and he held back his right-hand man who wanted to take his head off with the sword. And because he felt that God had sent him, and that he was able to receive that and take it and let him do that, that maybe God would think well upon him in terms of his forgiveness he needed. So he did really well at that. Again, the point is, though, before you act emotionally, I will recompense evil. Wait for the Lord. He'll save you. He'll show you the way to go. Because a lot of times when we react emotionally, we don't have a clear head to see what the circumstances. We're not able sometimes to see the repercussions. And just like going to war, you need wise counsel around you. If you remember back in chapter, I think it was 16, in terms of picking advisors, pick someone that can kind of mellow you out when you're going through an emotional crisis, something that's happening that's causing you to react emotionally. Okay. But now we go back to 21. An inheritance gained hastily at the beginning will not be blessed at the end. Now, how can that be a verbal thing? Remember back the prodigal son. What was the prodigal son's demand of his father? Give me my inheritance. And that is simply as if you're saying, I wish you were dead. So when you're asking for an inheritance before the time, you're saying, I wish you were dead, that I received it now. I really need it. Now give it to me. So it's no respect for the parent at all. Okay? So all four of those have to do with sins of the tongue coming from the heart, but they're grouped together like that. Verses 23 through 27. Diverse weights are an abomination to the Lord, and dishonest scales are not good. So we've seen this multiple times, twice in this chapter. And what it simply means is saying, son, no double standards. And no receiving bribes or anything. Because the whole concept of diverse weights and dishonest scales is the way they used to, like, if a person had, I don't know what it was back there, gold, silver, bronze, and it was in a block form or a chunk form, and then they'd shave off parts of them, and then they weigh it over against something that was supposed to weigh a certain thing. But if that something that says 1 gram on it was actually a half a gram, then you're out, okay? In other words, he's cheating, okay? And it was done in different ways. And so God is saying it's an abomination. Why? You, as king, are setting the standard. You are sending a message to the people on how they're supposed to act. You're sending a message on whether you're to be respected or not. And because of all that, you've got to be very careful to do things honestly. Don't forget what you inherited. You've got it all, okay? And that was one of the gripes against David from Nathan or from God. I mean, you could hit anybody. Why'd you go take a guy's wife and kill him? Diverse weights are an abomination to the Lord, and dishonest scales are not good. A man's steps are of the Lord. How then can a man understand his own way? A man's steps are of the Lord. Well, we learned in the first verse that King Solomon told his son, you have absolute authority. But here the absolute authority is God's. Okay? The Lord has absolute authority. And so in each of those instances, Solomon's trying to get his son to get into stronger relationship with the Lord through understanding and wisdom, and so that he can understand his way. Now, the Lord has absolute authority. He's controlled. How many believe that God has absolute authority? Okay? He has absolute control. Okay? Yeah, God is not surprised by anything. Now, he gives us freedom. But in that freedom, if you know the Lord, in that freedom, if you're going the wrong way, he's going to steer you back on the right way. So he does have absolute control. And he has absolute control over everything. That's why you can take Romans 8:28 and say, all things work together to good to them that love God and are called according to his purpose. Because even those evil things that we have had done to us or sins that we've committed that we need forgiveness for, God can use it to good because he can help others through our experience if we are able to draw it out and be, like we saw last week, a fountain. Wisdom is supposed to be a fountain. It's not supposed to be a pond that you keep for yourself. It's to be a fountain that springs up life for other people. It is a snare for a man to devote rashly something as holy and afterward to reconsider his vows. How many remember the story of Jephthah? God, if you help me to win this war, the first thing that comes out of my hut over here, the front door of my house, I'll offer as a burnt sacrifice. God helps him win the war. He goes home. Guess what walks out? His daughter, his only child. And he basically rips his clothes and says, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Now, some people, unfortunately, and I think they just didn't read through it. It was so stark to them, is the only thing I can figure, that they thought that he offered her as a burnt sacrifice, which goes totally against the context, and it also goes against historical context, because that was against God's laws to offer and sacrifice a child. Okay, that belongs to Molech, that belongs to Chemosh, that belongs to all the Baal, all the false gods. They're the ones that wanted child sacrifice. So if you look, as a matter of fact, let me go look at the end of the story, because I copied actually the whole story here. But if we look at the end of it, so he goes to her and she says, so she said to him, my father, if you have given your word to the Lord, do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth. Because the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the people of Ammon. Then she said to her father, let this thing be done for me. Let me alone for 2 months, that I may go and wander on the mountains and bewail my virginity, my friends and I. So he said, go. He sent her away for 2 months, and she went with her friends and bewailed her virginity on the mountains. And it was so at the end of 2 months that she returned to her father, and he carried out his vow with her, which he had vowed. She knew no man. And it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went 4 days each year to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite. So you can say what he ended up doing so that it fit within the law of Israel was he offered her for perpetual virginity, which would mean in modern a nun. Okay, it would be like Samuel. It would have been like if Hannah had gone back on the vow that she made of the giving the son unto the Lord. So what happened to this young lady is that she never got married. She would be like in a convent. She would be in a position where she was going to offer to the Lord her life, and yet for those 2 months she bewailed her virginity, meaning she would never be able to be married and have a child. So that's actually what happened. And so if you ever hear anybody interpret the other way, it's just inconsistent with God's laws, and it's inconsistent with what it says there about the illustration was that she knew no man. Make sure I didn't leave out one verse here. Hold on, let me go back here. I'm looking for the place of the vow. Oh, here we go. It's a snare for a man to devote rashly something as holy, and afterward to reconsider his vows. Don't go back on them. A wise king sifts out the wicked and brings the threshing wheel over them. Now, the key word there is wicked. Okay? A wise king sifts out the wicked and brings the threshing wheel over them. To have a stable, peaceful society, a kingdom, you can't allow blatant wickedness to in any way contaminate it. So if a person is doing something wicked, we would call it today, this was an interesting thing that happened right down in San Diego, I believe it was, where there was a bunch of outrage because ICE agents went to a daycare center and picked up a man who was highly loved by the people that had their kids there. But then it came out today, what they found was that he was a serial pedophile. So the issue then being, a lot of times we in our lack of trust that people are actually doing what they're saying doing, picking up people with criminal records, we can we can examine that and say, well, yeah, I guess that's, if a person was a criminal pedophile, that's exactly where he would try to go work. In a daycare center, in a center for kids, okay? And the bottom line of this thing, a wise king sifts out the wicked and brings a threshing wheel over them. That's exactly what happened there, okay? Not in terms of the person's death, but they're going to be out of the country, if nothing else, okay? The spirit of a man is the lamp of the Lord, searching all the inner depths of his heart. Think about that for a second. The spirit of a man. The spirit of a man is the lamp of the Lord. In other words, God created us. He knows our spirit. He knows our motives. The spirit of a man, the motives of a man, is a lamp to the Lord, searching all the inner depths of his heart to find out the motives. Why is he really doing what he's doing? That's why God says, I will repay, says the Lord, because he knows much better than we know. That last part I put down here, a wise king winnows the truth from the lies and crushes evil to maintain stability and peace within the kingdom. Remember, it is the Lord who knows the heart of man, and he will, through wisdom, enable you to see the true motives of man. And then finally, the last two verses, and we're right on schedule here. Mercy and truth preserve the king, and by loving kindness, he upholds his throne. Okay, so he's dealt with, right before that, he talks about, hey, where it comes to wickedness, you need that threshing wheel to come on them. You're going to have to deal with it harshly, because we're not talking about a minor traffic accident. We're talking about a wicked individual that's sowing discord and pain within the kingdom, within the community. And those people need to be dealt with harshly. And then he comes back at the end to do just like he did last week and say, but look, with everything you're doing, no double standards. You need to be fair. Don't let your heart get corrupted by what's happened to you. But instead, here it is. Mercy and truth preserve the king. If you are seen by the people, a person that will protect them by getting the wicked out, but at the same time you will have mercy and loving kindness, because it says, mercy and truth preserve the king, and by loving kindness he upholds his throne. If they see you in that regard, they're going to respect you, they're going to love you, they're not going to allow evil to come in and usurp your throne, things like that, okay? Then he goes on to say this. The glory of young men is their strength, and the splendor of old men is their gray head. So what he's saying there, if you do justly, if you do fairly, okay, then you're going to have a length of time, which is, again, the king's going to be until the son takes over or whatever happens. Depends on warfare and everything, but the ultimate goal is that he'll be there to his old age, and his gray hair will be a demonstration that because he has dealt fairly, he didn't have double standards, he wasn't taking bribes, he was able to deal harshly with people that needed to be dealt harshly with, and at the same time he would show mercy and loving kindness, then the gray hair would be a testament to the fact that he served that kingdom correctly. So he's saying, here's the bottom line. This is what needs to be the underpinning of your kingship, okay? And that is mercy and truth preserve the king, and by loving kindness he upholds the throne. The glory of young men is their strength, and the splendor of old men, which he's hoping he gets to, of old men is their gray head. And then he closes with this. Blows that hurt cleanse away evil, as do stripes the inner depths of the heart. So you can look at that in two ways, and both are correct. Number one way is that if he is dealing justly with people, that when he corrects them, when he puts punishment on a person, that if he's doing it correctly, the hope is that that person will actually learn from it and come out better once whatever they have put on them comes to pass. But I look at that as a secondary issue. I think what he's really saying here when he says blows that hurt cleanse away evil, as do stripes the inner depths of the heart, he's talking to the son about himself, about the king, the eventual king. He's saying to him, you're going to go through things as a king that are going to be like blows that hurt, okay? And those blows that hurt, instead of you becoming hard-hearted, instead of you become a wrathful king, if you can come through it with mercy and loving kindness and so forth, okay, and stripes the inner depths of the heart, instead of destroying you, if it actually makes you stronger and compassionate and caring, and you don't move away from what your real calling is as king, then you'll actually get stronger through it. It'll be something that, unfortunately, you're going to have to go through because as king, you're going to have circumstances that you cause that go wrong. Hopefully not. If you're seeking the Lord's wisdom, you are going to have circumstances cause things that people are going to get upset with you. You're going to have people that possibly could try to usurp you. You might have the closest people to you that you love the most, and they do something really wrong, and now you're going to have to judge them, not based on your love for them, but on justice, what is right and wrong, and that whole community is going to be watching. That's why Nathan said to David, it's not a matter of God's forgiveness. It's you did this deed in front of all of Israel. They all saw it. And because of that, the sword will never depart. As long as you're living, the sword is not going to depart from your house. It's not a matter of God's forgiveness. He got that by his 7 days on his belly before the Lord. But in terms of what he caused, because everybody saw it. So this king, he's going to be making decisions that people are going to see, whether he's just, fair, loving, merciful, protective of them when some wicked person needs to be dealt with. They're going to see it all. And so that's it. That's tonight. So I want to say, first of all, before we get into questions and answers, I want to say goodbye to everybody that's watching tonight. Thank you for being with us. And next week, we're at the same time, same channel. You just look for the little sign that says we'll be back. We'll be starting immediately, and watch for the hand pulling it out. We'll see you next time. God bless you. Bye-bye.